The internet is getting louder. Content sounds exactly the same, and ads are screaming at the same volume in every corner of the internet you go. So we need to keep scrolling faster and farther to find things we actually want to pay attention to, which narrows down our interests, forcing companies and platforms to show more ads and more noise just to keep showing similar results. The current state of the internet is no accident. This was caused by the cost of making content dropping close to zero and the business mindset of making money at all costs. Every business with a social media account can now spam endless amounts of content without anything worth saying. But somewhere inside all that noise, things are shifting. People are forming smaller communities. They're starting to check if something was made by an actual person and are starting to value things that take time to make. I think we're at the beginning of a different kind of economy, not the attention economy we've been talking about for the last decade, something that runs on meaning instead. This episode is about what that looks like for your business and why the way you stand out now has almost nothing to do with how loud you can get. My name's June, and you're listening to Antiviral, a human approach to marketing. So, welcome everybody to the second episode of my podcast. And I think I want to start by talking a little bit about the history of the internet, I guess, and kind of how it got started, or what makes it so similar to where we are today. So, back when the internet sort of first started, it was basically the Wild West, right? Everybody was scared about this thing. Everybody didn't understand it, and people were, poking fun at the fact that this was just going to be a fad, that this was not real, that this was going to change nothing. And the few people that started creating websites, very, very simple websites, mind you, um, they were made fun of. They were like, what are you going to do with that? And these microblogs were essentially what kickstarted the internet. These small groups of people that were trying something and were writing about interesting things, and other people from around the world would come and check out those written pieces of content and like, hey, that's really cool, and kind of band together. Eventually, that ended up kind of progressing to social media, right? To MySpace, to Facebook, to any of the things that we know and understand today, which again was a way to kind of make community, if you will, make that idea that the micro blogs made back into a larger platform that everybody could be a part of. And that normalized the internet, if you will. I think the internet was kind of becoming more normalized throughout, even before the social media platforms. But these kind of progressions was what made the internet become more normalized and accepting, and everybody just kind of accepted that it was part of the world and it's part of how to live. And now everybody uses the internet, right? And you see the same thing with YouTube, social media platform based on images or based on videos. That's where Instagram came up. And now you have TikTok, which is just, all these kinds of things. And now the latest technology, obviously, right? The elephant in the room is AI. And everybody is scared of how or what it can do, or how well it can do it, or does it even work? Does it even make a difference? And, does it even mean anything? So I think from that standpoint, we are in the wild west all over again of how the internet sort of got started. And you can see this back to even, when TV first started, the radio, world and industry was freaking out, right? When the printing press got started, or with the telephone, invention came around, everybody was scared of it. Everybody didn't want it, or they didn't know how this would change the world, how this would operate and make things different. And yet, here we are, right? Using everything that has progressed over time. Back when the Wild West and the microblogs were happening, everybody was just doing it essentially for the fun of it, right? There were no ads, there was nothing. It was really an empty space. And slowly but surely, companies started realizing that, hey, there's money to be made here. So ads started coming into plays, and people are starting putting, blocking things behind paywalls in order to make some money. And that's kind of what leads us to where we are today with the internet. It's just that now, as you probably heard from the intro, it's gotten so large that people, and I don't know if you feel it this way, but I feel it this way for sure. I don't have time, right? The world is too busy. There's too much going on. Things are going too fast. I don't have time to deal with things that I'm not interested in because I have to pay attention to like 1,000 different things. So I try to tune out everything that doesn't interest me. And that poses a problem for the businesses and the corporations and all the people that are trying to make money off of the online world. And it's like, so what do we do now? Well, the option and the only option or the easiest option that they have is to actually throw more ads in, more noise in, and hope that with enough of it, and that's a very common thought process in business, right? With enough, if you are everywhere, at some point, something will happen. At some point, somebody will come to your store and buy something from you. At some point, with enough noise, someone will pay attention. And everybody is thinking this way. Think of how many thousands, millions of companies are out there around the world because the internet is worldwide. Every single one of them is thinking the exact same way and created the exact same amount of noise. And the platforms are responding to that because look, everybody wants to put out more noise. So here you go. Let's put out more. And everybody's okay with it. And, but before we even had the internet, things were kind of very similar. This is the reason why when you know, drive around, you still see billboards everywhere. That industry is still very much here and very much alive, right? It's been switched now. Now everybody is doing like digital billboards, but it's still very much of the exact same thing. Before the internet, before any of this, worldwide connection, you used to be inundated with advertising as you were driving past because again, it's one of those things that everybody is doing at some point is driving to go to work, driving to go spend time with your family or, you know, whatever it is that you need to do. You're driving somewhere and that is where everybody is. So here's where we're going to plant our ads. Difference early on was that you only needed to be slightly better than the competition in your area, right? All you need to do was just be slightly more professional, have slightly better products or a slightly better service, whatever it is, than the companies in your area. And really, you could probably count them in with your hand, the competition that you had. So really, you were just talking about five people, maybe five companies that you needed to deal with, maybe a handful of like multinational companies, if you will. But you could think about them, like, you could remember them, you could figure out who they are. The internet changed that entirely. We kept the exact same process, the exact same methods, and the exact same way of thinking. But now we're competing with thousands of businesses that are trying to solve the exact same thing. And that makes it that just being slightly different doesn't really make a difference because everybody is trying to be slightly different. And this is where, again, the drowning of and the noise starts coming in where you feel like you can't really stand out. So you just kind of start yelling as much as possible. And there's a great word that came into play in the dictionary. I can't remember. I think it was 2023 or 2024, somewhere around there. But it's called enshittification, and that essentially means the degradation. It was the word of the year for that year, but it essentially means the degradation of products. I think it's online products, but the degradation of products um, because of, I think, right? Because it becomes popular. So it increases demand and increases the way that we can make money. So then money gets added in, advertising gets added in, all these kinds of things, and features start being removed because you can still make money without having doing all this work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then going back to how everything works now, right? The algorithms, the companies that own the algorithms, they're trying to respond to whatever it is that the world is asking of them. Because if it wasn't working that way, nobody would use their products, right? If the companies were doing whatever it is that they wanted and not following what the majority of the population cared about doing, they would just you could just go somewhere else or you could just not use it, right? So these companies like Google and all the social media platforms, what they're doing is they're taking a look at how people are using their products, their platforms, and then creating ways to keep you there for longer, for you know for their benefit, but keep you there based on how you interact with things. And because everybody is wanting more content, or everybody is putting out more content, they see that metric and they're like, hey, we should be allowing different ways or different variations of how we can put out content. Or everybody that is in business is wanting to throw money at the wall to see what sticks. So let's make that easier. Let's make that faster. Let's make that so that that money goes in our pockets instead. And that's where the algorithms end up changing into what we have today, where it all rewards quantity. Now you think of the typical marketing um, spiel that you get from everybody that always talks about you need to be posting. You need to be posting every single day. You need to be advertising every single day. You need to be doing everything every single day because at some point something will work, right? It goes back to that mentality of growth at all costs. And how do you compete with that? How do you change, right? How do you not do that when you feel like this is unsustainable? And I think a lot of businesses feel that this is unsustainable. I think a lot of people don't like marketing because it feels that way, right? And because of this sheer amount of quantity of content that you have to put out there, who has the time? That becomes a separate job. You're busy dealing with your business, you're busy dealing with your employees, and who has the time to think about and create content, good content, if you will, so that it goes out there and reaches the masses every single day at all times, all the time, right? Nobody has that time. So you end up making it as easy as possible for you, where you start getting AI to do it for you, or you end up, just not doing it, or doing what typically always happens, which is, hey, I have something to sell. And that's what you just repeat forever and ever, everywhere that you do marketing. And now that AI has come into play, and now that AI is at a certain level that it's good enough, if you will, for you to prompt it to create blogs or content or things like that, what's the barrier of entry? There's nothing. Like now, AI can make content faster than any one person could, and they can do it all the time. As long as you're paying for it, you can just keep having it create content for you, which means that it's driving the concept of quantity, right? And the cost and the what you could get out of it. You're driving it close to zero because everybody has access to this now. Everybody can do this. And that makes it also significantly harder to even stand out even more because now there is more content. There is more low quality content, but there is a lot more content, and everybody has this capacity of doing it as well. There's something that I like to also point out, even with this same concept, in that the cost of content is starting to become close to zero because of AI. Well, I think that the price of attention is actually doing the opposite, and it's actually going up. Because as I mentioned in the intro, more and more people, right? Because the amount of noise that is out there, more and more people have to pay closer attention to what they're choosing because I can't consume it all. There is too much noise. There is too many things to pay attention to. So I need to narrow things down and focus on the things that I really, really care about, the things that make me feel a certain way, or the things that make me be a certain person, or whatever it is that you value. And then just put blinders on and not think of anything else. So that makes it so that attention is becoming very, very valuable. And multiple companies and multiple businesses, multiple platforms are trying to figure out ways of how to manipulate because they're thinking about it from an algorithm perspective, right? And everybody thinks of algorithms as something that I can manipulate, something that I can potentially game the system in order to get, you know, a step ahead than other people. But they're thinking about it in the same way for a person's attention. It's like, how can I game? How can I gamify, commodify? How can I come up with a way to manipulate someone's attention so that you pay attention and stay here for longer or pay attention to me and not to other people? And that's where, again, more noise and more yelling starts coming in. See, because maybe if I yell louder, people will come. Or maybe if I say something really, really crazy, people will stop. If I say something completely out of left field, people will pay attention, even though it may not be true, even though it may not have anything to do with anything. And that's kind of where we are, right? Is trying to figure out how to game the system of a person's attention. And that's really crazy. And the what I have seen so far from the internet, and you can see this if you actually pay close attention to. But Facebook, as an example, used to be the largest social media platform, still is. I believe like billions of people have an account with Facebook, and no other social media company is actually can actually beat that. But whenever you go to Facebook, and I don't know if everybody is this way, but for example, most of what I use Facebook for is for the smaller groups that I am a part of, for, where I live, for the things that I like, for the things that I care about, these little like, Facebook groups. And that's kind of when I start talking or what I start thinking about is like people are starting and have slowly, right, started moving into smaller and smaller communities, even within the same platforms, even in different platforms. They're trying to find smaller communities. Why? Because there's less noise, right? I would much rather be in a Facebook group that has like a few hundred people about this one very specific thing that I like or care about, or, this specific neighborhood that I'm a part of, and not be in the generalized, like, you know, worldwide group, Canada-wide group, if you will, where there's like anybody and everything, and it feels chaotic, and it feels like there's a lot of things going on, and it's hard to moderate, and it's hard to, you know, keep up with really good quality content when it starts getting to a certain stage. So I think over time, people have started moving to smaller communities. This is the reason why places like Discord, as an example, have become popular. It's just different places that really cater to a specific group of people for a specific reason, right? And anybody can create small communities. You can see Reddit as an example, why it's become so popular, why it still is a very popular medium is you can kind of create your own subreddit, your own groups, and just hang around with the people that actually really care about this and focus on this instead, right? That tunes out so much of the noise that is out there on the internet. And I think another thing is that people are starting to state, and I've seen it, people are starting to state whether their content is human made, whether their content is AI generated, mostly because some companies and some places actually demand that you state whether it is generated or not. But still, the opposite is also happening where people are starting to state that this was handcrafted, this was handmade, this was done by an actual human. And that is immediately creating a lot more value. When I see something that has that, frame that says this was like hand curated or this was made by an actual person, it immediately makes me feel like this is going to be um, of a certain quality, right? I actually start thinking that this is probably going to be more expensive, but it's probably going to be more worth it because somebody actually thought about how to do this. And the reason why this is happening is, I might have touched on it on the previous episode, but the idea of people want real now. People, if you go to Amazon, as an example, and you want to buy a product, I do this all the time, but whenever I go to buy something, I already know usually what I want to buy. And then the first thing that I do is I immediately scroll down to the reviews. I don't look at the product description. I may look at the pictures, but I don't look at the product description because I don't care. Because chances are they're going to be telling me that they're the best thing since sliced bread. That is going to color, you know, and this description, I guess, is being colored in a way that I don't trust. I don't think that what they're saying is true, right? Or even if it is valuable in some way, I would much rather go and do my own research and find that out myself, other on just like listening to whatever the business put there and then trusting that it's real. I go to the reviews because I want to know whether this actually contributes something, whether there's a flaw, whether there's an issue, whether it's real people talking about it and how their experiences around this product, right? And that makes it so, so valuable because people nowadays, I think, are looking for real. People used to look for professional. People used to look for, I don't know, groundbreaking, whatever it is that you wanted. But nowadays, I think the world has turned into wanting to feel real, that there is something that feels grounded, where I can actually be present and in the moment and feel like I can trust what is happening in front of my eyes right now. And that's where I've started kind of thinking about the fact that I think we are finally moving away from the attention economy. We've talked about as in marketing, it gets talked about. It's been talked about a lot. The idea of the attention economy, where again, you are supposed to be everywhere and do all this stuff and post every day and gain as much attention as possible because attention equals money. That's what's always been kind of talked about. If you have enough attention, money will eventually trickle through somehow. Even with bad numbers like 1% conversion or 1%, of the results and 1% going to clients, if you have a million followers or a million, email newsletter, people, eventually, even if it's 1%, you're going to have clients. That was the understanding or the idea of the attention economy. And I think what we're getting into it now, going back to real and why, for example, Google reviews and why everybody pays attention to Google reviews as well, why everybody now wants reviews and social proof on their websites is because of this idea of being real. We are entering into what I consider and I like to call the meaning economy, where now people are paying attention to meaning, to depth, right? To craft. And whether this is actually something, a level, right, of meaning that they consider useful or valuable. And that level of meaning is what they will interact with. There's a lot of art, um, you know, that is being made by AI. There's a lot of pictures. I don't know if I would call it art, but there's a lot of pictures that is being made, or a lot of videos that are being made using generative AI. There's a lot of video games that are being made with generative AI components and stuff. And people are becoming increasingly, as it keeps permeating into our world, people are becoming increasingly more um, attuned to this and whether they care enough about it. because if they don't care enough about it, or if they see, for example, I see, because I like to play video games, I see that a video game that I want to buy used AI assets in their production or in their creation, and then switch them out or whatever, I'm okay with that, right? Or it's for little things that don't matter, or they made it so that there was a starting point of how they created certain assets, right? That eventually somebody finished off or became the final product, right? I'm fine with that. There is a level of meaning, or there's a level of craft for me that I am okay with using AI, if you will, for artistic purposes or for creative purposes, because I think there can be some value in saving time in order to do something that just, again, just takes time, right? Um, and everybody's going to have different thresholds for this. And that's why I like to call it the meaning economy, because now you can be like, I'm completely okay with anything that is made with AI. I will pay however much money it is in order to have anything that is made with AI, and that is okay with me. Then great. That's cool. And that's your threshold, right? Same with everybody else's threshold. And this used to be the same with different kinds of, I guess, economies, right? Whether you have enough money, or whether you think, or whether you really like this category, or you really, we're adding another layer now of meaning. And if there is enough meaning, if you are a company that is crafting something with enough meaning for a certain group of people to actually care about that meaning, then you have found more or closer to your people, the ones that will actually stick around and buy from you, your long term customers. Productivity is really not a factor anymore, and again, it goes back to that idea of AI. But AI can do things much, much faster. Things that took a long time for a person to make, right? Not for it to be of a certain quality, but just because it took a long time, now can be done with AI, or now can be done. A lot of factory jobs, as an example, are automated. That really doesn't adjust the quality. Maybe it does, who knows? But that it doesn't adjust the quality of the final product. It's just, it was busy work that now a machine can do. And I think we're entering into the same theory, or the same idea online, where now certain things are that just take time are definitely something that we can leverage and make much faster, for the sake of now productivity doesn't differentiate us, right? Now, perspective is what differentiates us. Our ideas, the way that we think, the way that we construct things. I think business is still kind of hanging around this concept, and the industry, if you will, all industries overall are kind of hanging around this concept that the more productive you are, the more efficient you are, right? The more money you're going to make, the more effective you are going to be. And I think that's been true up to now. Now, with productivity not longer being a large differentiator, now perspective, your point of view, the way that you view things, the way that you describe things, that is what's going to start making that difference. And understanding who you are and how you relate to others is going to become increasingly more and more important, because your unique humanity, right? Who you are is how you stand out, and gives that meaning to the content that you're putting out there for social media. Now, when you think about creating a post, when you think about doing an ad, or doing, any sort of marketing endeavor, anybody can use AI. Anybody can make anything to make something efficient, or something generalized that works. Now, what is going to make the difference is whether you can make something specific for a small group of people to interact with, that really cares about this level of meaning, about this level of depth. And that is, I think, where we are going. Understanding who you really are, the things that you really care about, what you value, what you understand, and putting that out there, and putting that as a point of view when you are doing your content, is really going to start making a difference. So usually, one of the things that I like to coach people in doing when they ask me, like, okay, so how do I do this? Right? How do I start with this concept? Is to think about when you first meet a potential client, right? What do you say? What do you do? What is the way that you interact with them? Do you ask them, where they're from? Do you try to, are you funny in that conversation? Do you try to crack a joke? Do you try to be as professional as possible? What is it that works for people normally for your audience, the ones that really really like you, the ones that really really connect with you, not just any audience, any person that walks through your store, but the ones that you really connect with. What happens there? What happens in that conversation? And that whatever you do in that in-person conversation is the same way that you need to think about doing it online. Because I think there is a large, let's call it a large misunderstanding on digital marketing where you think that because I'm really good at being in person, but the second that I go online, I have to become someone else. I have to be a certain way. I have to be more professional or I have to be more uptight. I have to wear a suit and a tie in my digital marketing because that is what works. No, no, that's not what works anymore. The same way that that doesn't particularly mean much for most places in most businesses in person. The way that you interact and build relationships on offline is the same way that you can build relationships online. It's just the way that you think about it has to change a little bit. And I say this that people are usually not in the room with you, when you're doing your marketing. People are no longer in the same room as you. So there is no back and forth that you can have. So the difference being that now before you could ask someone and there would be a reply and you could start building rapport and building something out of that. But because there isn't that, you as the person that is creating your own sense of marketing, your own stuff, now we as the business have to put the first foot forward. We can't ask first and be like, hey, so what seems to be the problem? Or hey, how are you doing? That's usually how conversations start. Now we are the ones that have to start the conversation. We have to pretend and we have to be on the other side, essentially. And we have to pretend that the other person is asking the questions for us and being like, who are you? Well, this is who I am. And that's what you put in there. Or, they're the ones asking the questions. I'm the one answering them, as opposed to me asking the question first. That's that essentially putting yourself out there in a way that you build relationships and the way that you do it, just you putting the first foot forward is what's going to eventually, right, culminate in someone else being like, I really like that person. Well, I really like what they're saying. I really understand what they're saying. And they're going to then come back. And once they come back and they're going to ideally or hopefully they're going to give you a call, they're going to put a form on your website or sign up through a form on your website, and then you can start having that conversation. But businesses now need to do the first step in building that relationship. That's the main difference in digital marketing. That's what most people, I think, get confused about. So that's where I go back to, how do you usually meet clients offline? Anything that you do, the types of conversations or how you view, categorize them, that same potential idea is what you need to do online. The exact same way. It's just that you need to put the first foot forward and start the conversation. The other one is the other idea that I usually give people is to start thinking about creating content for one person and one person only, right? Because it becomes a lot easier. when you have, let's say, someone like your best customer, the top of the line, the ones that gets it, the ones that you really like, the one that you can, you go in and it feels like you've known each other for 10 years because maybe that's the reason why they're your best customer, right? But talk to them. And what is it that how did they start? How did that relationship go? What are the questions that they ask? What are the things that happen? And you talk to them and you explain things to them and you do the same way that you would them, because again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to attract more of them. You're trying to attract more people that care about the same things that you care about, that care about the same meaning, that care about the same way that you think, the same way that you do things, the same reasons why this perfect client has kind of stuck around, right? You want to showcase that so that you can get others of the same caliber, if you will. I think loud used to be a competitive advantage. It really did. The same with the idea of professionalism, right? Back in the day, you really being professional really set you apart because most people weren't professional. Now everybody is. Now, professionalism, that loud idea of yelling and being everywhere and doing all these things, now it's just noise. The businesses and the people who will stand out over the next few years are not the ones who figure out how to be louder for cheaper. That's not a thing anymore. They'll be the ones that take their time to craft meaningful, valuable pieces of content for their own small communities. Less is now more. I want to thank you guys very much for listening to this episode. And if you liked it, I hope you follow on Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever it is that you are listening from, and leave a review or email me. Tell me anything that you would want changed, anything that you would want improved, and how you want to receive this content. We are starting slowly, but we are going to get into the very specific contents like AI, SEO, advertising, all those sorts of things. But I want to get a good foundation of understanding marketing before we start moving into those types of topics. So yeah, let me know anything that you enjoyed or anything that you would like to improve, and I will see you in the next episode.